So, hello, welcome everyone. Today we are having session 6 of Shifu Simplicity's talk about the essence of Mahayana practice. And as you remember, that was cancelled a few weeks ago because she was sick, but today she's with us. And I'm very happy to have her here. So welcome, Shifu Simplicity, so nice to see you. And welcome to everybody who is watching online. And without further ado, I will hand over to Shifu Simplicity to give her talk. And please leave all questions and comments in the live chat if you have any.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy that we have this talk here today, and I have this opportunity. I've been invited by Buddhist Insights to give this series of talks on the essence of Mahayana practice by Bodhidharma. I don't know whether you were there during the last talks. The text, just to review a little bit, the text had 5 paragraphs, and the first sentence of the text was, "To enter the great way, there are many paths, but essentially there are of 2 means, by principle and by practice." So the first paragraph was entering the way by principle, and that was teaching us the method of sudden enlightenment, the method of people who have sharp roots of wisdom when they hear about the teaching of pure mind, of Buddha nature, and they hear about the teaching and can directly experience it. And experiencing it, they can dwell on this mind that is beyond duality, that is beyond the duality of self and others, beyond the duality of inside and outside, of me and the world, beyond the duality of samsara and nirvana. It is just pure awareness. And that is our Buddha nature, and everyone has this Buddha nature, everyone has this pure mind. And so in the first chapter, it was talking about, Bodhidharma talked about how it feels and what is to directly experience that pure mind and how to continue to dwell on it. And the other 4 chapters, the chapters were entering the great way. The great way here is the mind of the Mahayana mind, the way to our Buddha nature, or the way of our Buddha nature, to be more precise. So here there are 4 following practices. That the first one was accepting adversity. That was, how do we practice when things don't go the way that we wish? How do we practice when we suffer, when we encounter obstacles? And basically in this chapter we learned that it's very important to understand causality, and that everything that we encounter is the result of our own karma that we created at some time in the past. And the practice is to accept that and to be in harmony with that karma, and to understand that this world is still an illusion, and what matters again is our true mind. So when we come to this full acceptance, we can be in accord with our pure mind. And the second of the 4 practices was adapting to conditions. That was the opposite. That was the situation where we have favorable conditions, things go well, we are successful in our lives with our practice, with other endeavors in life. And how do we view this? How do we practice, and how do we see this? And here again, we try to subdue our pride and our excitement about our success by understanding everything is causes and conditions. It has to do with our previous efforts in previous lives and a lot of favorable conditions we meet in this life. So this way we can also try not to be too excited, not to be blown away by the wind of joy or pleasure. And the third was seeking nothing. That was to understand that we don't want to strive for anything. That was the last talk. Of course, there's desires, there's wholesome desires like the desire to practice, but here mainly it was about other things, how we strive to get things, material things. We strive for certain situations in our lives, and we have a clear cut about likes and dislikes, and we want to gain things that are favorable and pleasant for us. How this can be an obstacle to our practice. And also, actually, in this striving, there's also included the attachment to the practice itself. As of course, it's a good way to have the desire to leave samsara, the desire to become enlightened, the desire to practice is necessary, is a good motivation, but we need to be clear that if we get overly attached to that, then we get stressed out in our practice. That happens quite a bit, that people, especially when they first encounter the Dharma, they get very enthusiastic and they think, okay, I practice very intensely for a few weeks and then I can become enlightened. And then they get very tense, and the enlightenment doesn't happen that quickly because conditions are not ripe, and then they get disappointed, and in the end they may want to give up the practice altogether. So that is an obstacle for advancing. And today we want to talk about the last of the four practices, acting in accord with the Dharma. And this is actually, in this practice, we can see that this is very similar to entering the way by principle. There's a slight difference I will point out, and we will now read the text and then we go through it. To act in accordance with the Dharma. The principle of intrinsic purity is the Dharma. By this principle, all forms and characteristics are empty, without defilements and attachment, without self or others. The sutra says, in the Dharma there are no sentient beings, because it is free of the impurities of sentient beings. In the Dharma there is no self, because it is free of the impurities of the self. When the wise believe in and understand this principle, they should also act in accordance with the Dharma. There is no parsimony in the Dharma. So practice the giving of body, life, and possessions without any reservation. Understand and achieve triple emptiness with no reliance and no attachment. One liberates others without becoming attached to form, thus removing impurities. This benefits oneself, benefits others, and also glorifies the Bodhi path. Dharma is perfected this way, so are the other 5 paramitas. In order to relinquish delusions, one practices these 6 perfections. Not yet nothing is practiced. This is to act in accordance with the Dharma. So here you see there is an emphasis on practicing the 6 paramitas of the Bodhisattva path. And what is the most important of this paragraph is the first sentence. The principle of intrinsic purity is the Dharma. In Chinese, you could also translate it as the principle of intrinsic purity, or the pure nature. The principle of the pure nature is viewed as the Dharma. We see it as the Dharma itself. So here it starts off with the principle, and we had that in the first of the 5 paragraphs, entering the way by principle. So here it is about the principle of mind. The principle of mind is our Buddha nature, that is pure, that is beyond all duality. Also pure, not that means that nature is of that nature of our true self, or the nature of awareness is the principle of our existence. This nature is pure. Pure, that means it is not defiled. In the nature of our mind, there is no greed, craving, anger, and ignorance, pride, doubt, and wrong view. There's no ego. So these are the 6 root defilements, and the nature of our mind, which is intrinsic, which is always there, which has been there before we were born, and which will be there after we die. That is neither born nor dying. That is not coming, not going. That is beyond our thinking mind. That is not coming into existence and not ceasing to exist. That is everlasting, and that is our pure mind. When we say our pure mind, we need to be clear that this mind is free from the defilement of ego, free from the defilement of self and others. So the saying my true mind is actually just a tool to talk about something that is beyond description. It's so because it's not mine in the sense that there is a person. This principle of mind, of pure mind, is empty. Empty, and on the one hand, there's nothing that can be grasped. There's no ego, there's no person. It is empty by nature. It is not conditioned by anything. And it is intrinsically pure. That is our true nature. And here in this chapter, it is we see that this true nature is the ultimate way to practice. We just try to experience this true nature. We try to experience our nature of awareness directly, and try to dwell on it and keep that up. But before we understand what it actually is, we need some tools to practice, to first of all calm our mind and to make room for the conditions to happen. But we can see what is the nature like and try in our daily life to try to reflect on ourselves and see whether our present mind is in accord with that principle of emptiness, with that principle of our true pure nature. And that means we look at ourselves, we look at our body, speech, and mind, and at every moment we see clearly whether this body, actions of body, speech, and mind are in harmony with that pure nature. That what does it mean? The moment I have greed in my mind, the greed for the chocolate or the greed for consuming something, then my present mind is not pure. So I'm not in accord with that principle of the nature of mind. So in that moment, what do? I see with my awareness, I'm aware of my greed, and immediately I let go of the greed. That means I don't give in to the greed. I see I want to eat the chocolate, but at the moment I see it, I stop myself from getting the chocolate. And that is the practice. So every time we look at ourselves, we reflect about our present situation, we use that principle of mind as our, let's say, our goal. We see whether right now am I in accord with that principle or not. And if not, I just adjust myself all the time, every moment new again and again. I always adjust myself. I look if my mind is defiled by thoughts. And then I see, well, there's defilement by thoughts. So I let go of the thoughts. I don't continue to hang on with the thoughts. I see that I'm distracting myself. I'm swiping on my cell phone, for example. I'm distracting myself. So when I see it, I become aware, I stop immediately. And then I can come back to just being present without being present without thoughts, without attachments, and just being aware and calm. That is how we practice. So by this principle, all forms and characteristics are empty, without defilement and attachment. So we see all phenomena are just emptiness. There is nothing that is real in this life. There is only the principle of mind. That is the only real thing, and we call that true reality. This true reality itself is still empty. So there is nothing we can grasp. There's nothing we can pinpoint and say, oh, this is it. It's just the awareness. And so when we see all phenomena and we are about to attach to phenomena, we can make ourselves aware again that these phenomena are actually empty. We don't need to attach, we don't need to grasp. So here, that is why by this principle, all forms and characteristics, that is all phenomena, are empty and without defilement and attachment. So we just see the things as they are. We don't attach because we know they are basically empty. So why should I attach to something? Not to something and not to somebody. I see other people are just coming together of causes and conditions. There is no substantial self, neither in me nor in others. So why attach to it? So material things too, they are just coming together of causes and conditions. There is no substantial self in the things. So why attach to them? All phenomena are just an illusion. So we see the illusion, we see it's like in a dream. When we're in a dream, we are aware that this is a dream. And when the moment we wake up and the pictures of the dream are still lingering around, we don't get caught up in the pictures anymore. We become aware, but we know, okay, that was just a dream. Or when we look at a film on the screen, a movie on the screen, we are aware that this is only a movie. So we don't really get upset about the story that is happening in the movie. Maybe when we see we are drawn into it very deeply, we feel emotional, we cry or we laugh, but eventually we know, oh, this is just a movie. So we don't really get worried about something that is happening on the movie screen. So here too, we see all phenomena are empty, and this way we don't attach, and then we don't get defiled. We get defiled when we attach to things, to people. But when we see they are empty of a self, then we can just be aware of them, but not attach to them. And that is a practice. So many times we might have that we hear about it, we read about it in a Dharma book or in a sutra, and we think, okay, yeah, it's all empty. But when it comes to our daily life, we act as if things were not empty, as if they were real. And that's the moment then we can remind ourselves, oh, this is just a phenomena. This is just causes and conditions coming together. We don't need to take it so serious, no matter whether it's a pleasant situation or an unpleasant situation. We can distance it from us. We can distance ourselves from it and become a bit detached from it. And then we gain more space in ourselves and more clarity. So then it continues. In the Dharma, there are no sentient beings, because it is free of the impurity of sentient beings. So in the Dharma, that is here in the nature of awareness, in the pure intrinsic nature, in the pure intrinsic principle, there's no duality between me and sentient beings. So being on the Bodhisattva path, this is very important, that we learn that on the one hand, we want to, that's the next sentence, we want to practice to understand that there's no self. But there's not only no self, but also there's no sentient beings. There's no duality between me and others. There's no forms. So in the ultimate dimension, there's only awareness. And so there's no coming up of certain things. There's no special dharmas. There's no phenomena. So here it's when we practice the Bodhisattva path, we want to help others. We see the suffering of others. We want others to learn about the Dhamma, to be free of the suffering, and maybe we make a lot of effort to help someone, no matter whether it's with Buddhism or in daily life, in other situations. We help someone, but very often when we are not careful, we get attached. We get attached to, there is the other person. This other person is real. The suffering of the other person is real. So we get very involved. And then when the people don't behave the way that we expect, we get disappointed when our help is not received well, or when it doesn't work what we thought, what we wanted to do, or when people don't show gratitude. And all we get, when it works well, we see we can help someone to be more happy, to suffer less. We gain pride and we become very arrogant. So all these are side effects of attaching to the view that there is other beings, to not see that the other beings are also empty of a self, empty of a nature. So that's why here it is said that in the Dharma there are no sentient beings, because it is free of the impurities of sentient beings. As long as we are attached, that is an impurity. That's an obstacle to our practice, an obstacle to our enlightenment, an obstacle to our deep understanding that we can, the deep understanding of true nature. So that's why we need to learn to let go. We help others, but we are aware that the notion of self and others is just a tool. There is no such thing as a self, and there's no such thing as others. This is a duality, and we want to transcend that duality. So it continues in the sutra, there is in the Dharma, there is no self, because it is free of the impurities of self. So here again, the Dharma is the intrinsic purity, the intrinsic, the pure principle of the Dharma. So here it comes to the self. It is very basic teaching of Buddha, of the Buddha, to make us understand that this person that we think we are, that this person is real. And we get attached to this person, to the self, and that's why we suffer, because we think it's real. But we learn to practice. There are various methods for us to, the Buddha taught us to understand that this person, we say it's made up of the 5 skandhas, the form skandha, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. And these 5, so the form and the mental skandhas, are all empty. The form, the physical form of ourselves is, as we know, is made up of different molecules of chemistry, of physics. And so in modern times, we can say we are made up of many different molecules, and molecules are made of out of atoms, and atoms are made of electrons and nucleus. And so we can divide form into matter into smaller and smaller parts. But actually, when we see that, we can see that the actually physical matter is very small. And I saw some report saying that the matter of the nucleus of the whole, our whole world, can be put in a sugar cube, and the rest of the world, what we think what is real, is empty space, because each atom has a nucleus and an electron or more electrons, and in between there's space, but we don't see it. We still feel that there is some solid matter. We feel our body is solid. We feel it, but actually in physics and in chemistry, there is nothing like that solid matter. Or when we think about quantum physics, there's only the quantum field, and there's no division between me and the chair and the air I breathe. It's one quantum field. But how come that I feel that I'm sitting on the chair and that I'm holding a cup of tea, for example, and the cup of tea is solid, and the tea I drink is liquid? It's different from me. That's only my deluded mind that has this impression. That is not the reality. But we, with our deluded mind, we make up a world the way we think we are used to it. And that's what we call is the deluded mind causing a deluded self to come into existence. When we are attached, we get attached to the self, then we suffer because we make ourselves separate from everything else. So we take ourselves the most important person of the world, and so we want things to be comfortable for us, and of course it's not possible that that is always working that way, so we suffer. And so here it's about the understanding that the self is empty, so that we are made up of just particles and waves, and actually those particles can sometimes manifest as matter and sometimes as energy. That's quantum physics. So very interesting that what the Buddha said thousands of years ago can be proven by modern physicists. But even though we believe in science and you read this stuff, this quantum physics stuff, you still feel that you are real. So you have the paper in your hand, you read it, you think it makes sense, but your understanding is this is me and this is the paper. That's because our habits are very strong. The habits of attaching to a body, the habits of attaching to the self. And the Buddha teaches us many methods how we can let go of this attachment and eventually be liberated from the suffering and from that wrong view. So here it tries to remind us the Dharma, that means here the intrinsic pure principle is free from the impurity of the self. As long as we grasp to the notion of the self, that is still an impurity in our mind. So when we let go, then we can understand that this person is also just an appearance. It's just an illusion. And then we can live freely. We don't get caught up anymore. Continues, when the wise believe in and understand this principle, they should also act in accordance with the Dhamma. So here's the wise people, practitioners. They, on the first hand, they believe it. They believe and have faith in what the Buddha is teaching. That is very important. There are so many people who are not practitioners, and they, let's say, someone listens to the talk today and says, "So why should it be this way?" But if you have doubt in what the Buddha has experienced, you don't have the power to practice. So even though Buddhism is a practice that is experimental, it's also very important to have faith and trust what the Buddha experienced in the first place. The Buddha is not a god, but the Buddha is a wise person, and the Buddha has realized the ultimate reality. And we just have to trust that what the Buddha has realized is the ultimate reality and is the truth. We have to trust the teachings the Buddha has given us. Otherwise, how can we go ahead and practice it? So here, someone who is wise, who trusts the Buddha, believes in the Buddha's teaching, in the sutras, in the sharings, and not only believes, but deeply understands this principle of mind. So when one is to believe something, the second step is to understand, to penetrate it, to have your own experience of it, and then your trust will grow. So in Buddhism, we can say that you come to a meditation class, you hear something, meditation has some benefits, then you start to practice, and then the more you practice, the more you make your own experiences in your meditation. And then you can slowly, gradually, you realize certain things. And then your confidence in your own practice and your confidence in the Buddha's teaching grows with each of your experiences. Once you see, okay, step A is true, then I believe that B to Z is also true, although I'm not there yet. But it's very important to have the experience of A, so our trust in the teaching will be solidified. So here the wise person has this experience. He is not only believing in the Buddha's teaching, but he understands the principle of mind, understands his true nature. He has seen, not seen with the eyes, but experienced his own Buddha nature, at least got a glimpse of it. And once you get a glimpse of your Buddha nature, you know it's really there. It's not just an empty talk that the Buddha gave. It's really there. And so many people have had this experience. And then once you experience it, you start to understand with your own experience. So the wise trust in, believe in, and understand this principle. And then the next step is to act in accordance with this pure Dharma. That means to, as I said in the beginning, to always contemplate and observe your mind, whether you are in this moment, you're in accordance with this Dharma or not. Whether in your mind there's greed, whether there's anger, resentment, whether there's boredom, whether there's fear, whether there's ignorance. And so you check your mind every moment and bring your mind back to this experience of true nature, always bringing yourself back. And that's very important, because some people, especially in the Zen traditions, in Japanese Zen, there's an emphasis on training very hard to have this experience. This they call Satori experience. And that is very good. And there's good methods who can lead the practitioners to have this experience. But this experience is only a beginning of the practice. That's not the end. And so it's about not gaining, not only having this experience once, because that's only a glimpse that will slip away and you are not really thoroughly enlightened. You are still caught up in samsara. You only have a glimpse of your true nature. And that is, you need to continue to practice so that this experience can grow deeper and deeper. You can dwell on your true nature in every moment of your life. And only when you get deeper and deeper, gradually, with the power of your awareness, your greed, anger, ignorance will vanish completely. And only then you have a big breakthrough and you can leave samsara. And then it's important to understand that the true mind is beyond the duality of samsara and nirvana. That's very important. So beyond the duality of, there is the impurity of the world, and on the other side there's the purity of mind, or the purity of emptiness. This is still a duality. There's still a duality between the practitioner and the practice object. So this, all this, you can see it goes deeper and deeper with your experience, and there's still a lot of room for depths, more experience in depths, and you can learn more as you go along the way, along the practice. So then when the person, the wise one, acts in accordance with the Dhamma, there is no parsimony in the Dhamma. So there's no stinginess. That when you dwell on your pure mind, your mind is naturally generous. There's nothing to hold back. So that is, so then the person practices. It doesn't, the practice is not to just withdraw and dwell on your pure mind, but you can only overcome the final subtle steps, especially the duality between self and others, by giving, by practicing the paramitas, because this still is an impurity, the impurity of duality. And you overcome that by practicing, for example, generosity. You know that your mind is pure, you know that this mind is perfect, so there's nothing that you need to hold back. So then you can see, how much am I in accord with this teaching? How much can I actually put into practice? How much am I ready for? And that's another checkup for yourself, where you see, oh, when you want to practice giving, dana, where am I still attached to? And then when you see your attachment, you overcome it by deliberately giving something. So there's no parsimony in the Dhamma to practice the giving of body, life, and possessions without reservation. So you could practice giving anything. You can give material things, you can give the teaching of the Dhamma, you can give fearlessness, and of the material things, what is treasured the most by us is our own life. And so you ask yourself, how can I give my own life? Because your person is an illusion. That person, that life that we cherish so much, is just an illusion. So when you truly understand true mind, you know that this person is empty. So there's nothing to hold back. So you could actually give your whole life. And that is what the Buddha, when he practiced the Bodhisattva path, that he did many times in his life, in his many lifetimes, he practiced giving his life. When he saw that there was one incident where he was a prince and he went out in nature and he saw there was looking down a cliff, there was a tigress, and the tigress had little cubs, and she was so weak she couldn't go hunting. So they were basically, she was almost starving. And then when the mother has no uh, food, that she doesn't give milk, so the cubs will also die. So the Bodhisattva, as a prince, he saw that scene and he saw there's a drama going to happen. All these tigers, including the children, will die very soon. So he didn't hesitate. He thought, what can I do to help them? There was nothing around, so he sacrificed his own life. He jumped off the cliff to feed the tiger with his whole own body. This is not suicide because this is not a negative state of mind. Suicide means when someone is depressed and doesn't want to live anymore, when someone doesn't see the point of living or is suffering to the point that he cannot endure living anymore. And so when that person takes their life is in a very extreme negative state of mind. And that carries over to the next life, because with that moment of death, life is not ended. Then the person will be reborn and carries over that extreme suffering and negativity to the next life. So suicide is not a solution to problems. But here the Buddha, when he sacrificed his life to feed the tiger, it was with a pure intention. He was really ready to give up everything, to sacrifice his own life and to do a good deed to feed the tiger. Of course, it's not something we need to do where go around and feed wild animals. We can only do that once with our body, and then we get reborn. But of course, we also want to practice. But it's just an example, and in one of the sutras, it says there's no point, no place in the world where the Buddha on his long Bodhisattva path has not sacrificed his life for others. It just gives us an idea to not hold back anything when we practice generosity, to not attach to anything, not attach to our material belongings. Usually when we always give a little and we still hold a lot back to ourselves. So here, when we understand the pure mind is perfect, pure mind is abundance, pure mind is everywhere. It's not limited to my physical body. It's not limited to any place or any time. It's everywhere, all pervading. So once I get in touch with that pure mind, there's no need to spare anything for myself, because myself is just an illusion. So then the mind is totally open and the mind can give very freely. And before we get there, we can train ourselves with small things of practicing generosity. We train ourselves to give, to be generous, to share what we have and not to hold anything back and not to think, oh, I need this for later, I want to buy this later, I want to have some enjoyment in the future. When there's the moment we can give, we should give. And by giving, we cultivate merits. And we need the merits also to have no obstacles in our practice. Merit cultivation works best with other people, when we can help other people in any kind of way. So when we practice giving, we try not to hold anything back. And that is generosity. And then we come to the next point: understand and achieve triple emptiness with no reliance and no attachment. And here, triple emptiness is wisdom. The wisdom of, sometimes we call it the emptiness of transmission, or here they call it triple emptiness. That means, well, you have the wisdom to understand that the giver, that means you yourself, the receiver, and the object given, all three are eventually empty. All three don't have a separate self, and so that is triple emptiness. The giver, the receiver, and the object given, all three are by nature empty. And that is wisdom. So when everything is emptiness, you can give very freely, but you still give, and that's the point. The point is not to see, okay, I withdraw into emptiness and I don't do anything. I just sit there on my cushion or in my cave. But the Bodhisattva path is to be active and help others. And while you're helping others, you're cultivating this wisdom. One with no reliance and no attachment. So you don't also think about, there's the ego that is practicing, there's me that is practicing, there's me that is giving, and then you develop pride or you get attached to the merits, and all this is kind of attachment. So here we try to use wisdom to dissolve all these attachments. One liberates others without becoming attached to form, thus removing impurities. So we practice, we always be aware that we don't attach. We practice generosity. We don't attach to the merits we gain. We don't attach to people. We help others. We don't attach to how they receive our help, whether they are, whether it's useful for them, whether they thank us, or whether we make a lot of merits by helping others. All these thoughts are already thoughts of attachment. We just do what needs to be done and then immediately let go. And then we don't need to come back to that, oh, I did this great thing last year and I donated so much money, or I helped a lot of people, or we don't, it's already past, it's gone, it's all empty. We just do it, and then the moment we do it, we continue, we do the next thing without stopping, without attaching. This benefits oneself and benefits others, and also glorifies the Bodhi path. So while we practice, for example, generosity, we benefit ourselves because we remove our stinginess, we remove our greed. Others benefit because they receive something. So, and then we glorify the Bodhi path. The Bodhi path is actually our true mind. So when we remove impurities by practicing this pure way of giving, this pure way of non-attachment, this way our mind becomes, our pure mind becomes more and more manifest. So our Bodhi path becomes more and more clear and more radiant, and we gain more and more energy on it. So this is about dana. Dana is perfected this way. So we practice dana, which is the first of the 6 parameter, and that is just given as an example. But here it continues. Dana is perfected this way. So are the other 5 parameters. So the other 5 are Shila, that means ethical conduct, Kshanti, tolerance or endurance, Virya, diligence, Dhyana, meditative concentration, and Prajna, wisdom. So all these parameters need to be cultivated, and then we continue. In order to relinquish delusions, one practices these 6 perfections, not yet nothing is practiced. So again and again, it's emphasized here, nothing is practiced is we dwell directly on our pure mind. And that is what we call Wu-Wei, the unconditioned Dharma. We don't use our thinking mind. We just use our pure mind, our absolute awareness while we practice the 6 parameters. So we do practice, we do engage, we do something to help others. We practice, but we don't attach to the practice, and we don't consider the practice. We just do it in a certain kind of very natural, intuitive way, and without attaching to the self, without the ego involved. And so we do it in a natural way. And that is how we practice, why we say the practice of non-practice. So it doesn't mean we don't practice the parameters, we sit and do nothing, but we engage, we do something, we practice giving, generosity, but we give naturally without consideration, without planning, without thinking. We just use our direct, pure mind to practice. And this is the way, this 4th chapter here, that we are training in. How we can come back via the first, the 4 practices, how we can be in accordance with the Dhamma, how we can be in accordance with our pure mind. And that is what it's all about, is how we can use the many ways of methods of practice to eventually get rid of our impurities, of our duality, and directly dwell on our nature of awareness. And when we found it, then we need to deepen that experience so we can get deeper and deeper, and then overcome samsara, and then still continue to practice the bodhisattva path after enlightenment, and continue all the way up to Buddhahood. And that is the Mahayana practice. So now we still have a few minutes for questions. Anyone?
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much for teaching us, Shifu. I really enjoyed the Dhamma talk today. And we have a few questions. One is actually about the point you just made about the Dana Padami. And this question is from Gita. And she says, Shifu, in Mahayana, it said, there is no giver, no receiver. Is this related to everything being empty? Can you explain a bit further? In the Theravada teaching, we give with purity of mind. Before giving, while giving, and after giving, all with absolute purity of mind.
Yes, but so you give with purity of mind, but you are aware that everything is empty. That is wisdom. So you, of course, when you practice dana right now, you use your thinking mind. Your mind is sincere. You have respect. You practice with the mind of generosity. That is the pure mind you are talking about. But so you don't think about your merits, and you don't give because you want to attain merits or a good result, or because you want to be praised. That is pure giving. But one step further, the pure mind is a state of mind that is beyond thinking, and that has already transcended the duality of self and others. So when you give, you're still aware that there's a me and there's a monk I give something to. And so that is still a defilement in your mind of duality of self and others. And this also we need to overcome, this duality of mind. And that's why prajna comes in, the wisdom to understand that there is no self, there is no other, and the object I give, let's say the fruit is also empty. So when you realize that this is this true emptiness of the three aspects, then your mind reaches a different level of purity.
Thank you, Shifu. And the next comment, this is actually a comment, not a question, but maybe you want to address a few points that this person raises. And they say, suffering might not be real, but its origin makes us crave to not having it or to have happiness that comes from the same root. So I would say that only two things really exist for everyone, sufferings or delusion and fears. Since most do not understand this because of ignorance, few are the ones understanding the Dhamma and very few can see it and defeat ignorance and their own karma forever.
Yes. Well, suffering is real to those who are not enlightened. Suffering is real to those who are still attached to the self. And once you overcome that, once you realize that the self is empty, then suffering ceases. And it's, well, of course, for most people who don't practice the Dharma, they don't have that understanding because everyone is attached to the ego. And even within practitioners, many people practice the Dharma and they are not yet at the level where they understand that the self is empty. So then, of course, for them, suffering is still feels real.
Okay, and another question just popped up. This is from Dan. Can learning about many aspects of Dhamma be unhelpful for keeping contact with this intuition for pure mind?
We have to understand that when we learn about the Dhamma, also it's important not to attach to the concepts of the Dhamma. The Dhamma is the finger pointing to the moon. When we attach to the finger, we miss the moon. And so we need to be ready to use the Dhamma as the tool, but the goal is to have our direct experience and direct understanding, and not to get up confused by the constructed Dharma that the Buddha taught us. Be aware that it's a tool and use it wisely, and then you come to see the moon for yourself.
Okay, Dan just clarified his question a little bit further. And he says, for instance, at the beginning after a sit, it felt like intuitively would not want to speak on Dharma, intuitively would keep precepts, then later on require help.
Well, it's very tricky to just rely on our feelings during meditation. We need to have a teacher who is more experienced, because there's all kinds of meditation experiences and people have certain feelings in their meditations, and then they might get misguided and think what they feel they trust without having any reference. So the teachings, either you read in the sutras about some Buddha taught about experiences, and also you find a teacher who can guide you. And for example, if you don't learn anything, it's very important, it's very difficult to make progress in the Dharma just by yourself. So I would say for now, it's would be like there's Pratyeka Buddhas who become enlightened without having a teacher, but that's extremely rare. And we want to think that I have this this talent would actually be a bit arrogant. So it's good to learn and read about the teaching and hear the Dharma talks, but to be aware deep in your mind to, when you meditate, to let go of the talk for the moment when you meditate, to just focus on your method and see what happens. But when you come out of your meditation, you still contemplate the Dharma the way that you learned it.
Okay, and Aum had another question about your center in Berlin. Shifu, what is your center called and where is it in Berlin? I have a friend who wants to visit. So I already shared your website in the chat. So they have the website. Maybe you can tell us if it's possible to visit and how to visit.
Sure, you can visit. The best is to write an email. The center is called Miao Fa Center. And on our website, you can use the email address there. And then, because sometimes we are busy here, but we can make a time and anyone is welcome to visit.
Okay, and Gita says, Shifu Simplicity, can you come back and teach us again some Mahayana Dhamma concepts sometime in the future, please? And I think the Empty Cloud Monastics also would be very happy if you came back to teach some more.
Sure. At some point, of course, I would be happy to teach more. Right now, I take a break because we have our new monastery project coming up, and I'm not sure how much I will, especially in the beginning, be involved in there. There will also be some work needs to be done, and so right now I cannot make any promises, but definitely at some time in the future I will be available again.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So I think this was the last question. So thank you again so much for teaching us today and for teaching this whole series of six talks. And I think we all really enjoyed it very much, and we had lots of questions, so it seems that also the audience was very engaged and enjoyed your teaching. So thank you so much for coming on today, and hopefully we'll see you again at some point in the future. And as usual, we will end with 3 sadhus, and the audience is invited to join in if they like. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm sure we will meet again here on this forum. Have a good day.